The Magic of the Runes by Samael Aun Weor. Final Part. Chapter 34. Rune Kaum. A long time ago, in the profound night of the centuries, there in the continent of Mu or Lemuria, I knew Jahveh, a fallen angel who was spoken of by Saturnine of Antioch. Certainly, Jahveh was a venerable master from the White Brotherhood, a glorious angel from previous Mahamvantara. I knew him. I saw him when he was a priest and a warrior among the people of Lemuria. Everybody loved, adored, and venerated him. The Hierophants of the purple race granted to him the high honor of using armor, crest, helmet, shield, and sword of pure gold. This warrior priest was shining as a flame of gold under the thick jungle of the sun. Upon his symbolic shield, Vulcan had engraved many prophesies and terrible warnings. Woe! 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 This man committed the error of betraying the mysteries of Vulcan. The Lucifers of that epoch who were floating in the atmosphere of the ancient continent Mu taught him Black Tantrism, the Maithuna with the ejaculation of the Ens Seminis. What is most grave in this matter is that this man who was so loved and venerated by all the world allowed himself to be convinced and began to practice this type of pernicious sexual magic with certain women. Therefore, it is clear that the igneous serpent of our magical powers descended through his medullary canal and was projected from his coccyx downwards, thus forming and developing in Jahveh's astral body the abominable Kundardaguator organ. This is how this angel fell and through all of the ages became converted into a terribly perverse demon. Many times, we have found the priestess spouse of Jahveh in the superior worlds. She is an ineffable angel. Useless were the efforts of this man to convince his spouse because she never accepted the Black Tantrism of the Tenebrous. Therefore, she preferred divorce rather than entering onto the black path. Jahveh is that demon who tempted Jesus the Christ, and when Jesus had fasted in the wilderness, this demon tempted him and said, "If thou be the Son of God, command this stone that it be made bread. It is written that man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word of God," answered Jesus. The sacred scriptures say that Jahveh then took Jesus the great Kabir up into a high mountain and tempted him by saying, "Itababo, all these kingdoms of the world will I give thee, if thou wilt fall down and worship me." Then the great Master Jesus answered, "Get thee hence, Satan. For it is written, Thou shalt worship the Lord thy God, and him only shalt thou serve." Finally, it is written that Jahveh brought Jesus to Jerusalem and set him on a pinnacle of the temple, and said unto him, "If thou be the Son of God, cast thyself down from hence, for it is written, He shall give his angels charge over thee, to keep thee, and in their hands they shall bear thee up, lest at any time thou dash thy foot against a stone." And Jesus answering said unto him, "It is said, Thou shalt not tempt the Lord thy God." And when Jahveh had ended all the temptation, he departed from him for a season. If we want to learn all the mysteries of the Rune Kaum, then we must now talk about White Tantrism. Those old times of ancient Egypt come into my memory in these instances. I was an Egyptian initiate during the dynasty of the pharaoh Khephren, in the sunny country of Kern. One given afternoon, filled with sun, while walking through the sands of the desert, I passed through a street that had millenary sphinxes on it, and I arrived at the doors of a pyramid. The guardian of the temple, a man with a hieratic and terrible face, was at the threshold. He was threateningly grasping the flaming sword with his dexterous hand. He asked me, "What do you wish?" I answered, "I am Zeus, the supplicant or genuflector, who blindly comes in search of the light." "What do you want?" I answered again, "Light." "What do you need?" I answered anew, "Light." I can never forget the next instant in which the heavy stone door turned upon its own hinges and produced the characteristic sound of the Egypt of the pharaohs, that profound doh. Then, the guardian took me roughly by the hand and put me inside the temple. I was deprived of my tunic and of every metallic object. Then, I was submitted to terrible and frightful ordeals. When in the ordeal of fire, I had to maintain complete control of myself. It was terrible to walk between two blazing beams of steel which were lit to a red heat. When in the ordeal of water, I was very close to being devoured by the crocodiles of a deep well. When in the ordeal of air, I resisted with heroism the hurricane winds, while hanging from a metal ring upon the deep of the abyss. When in the ordeal of earth, I believed I would die while between two boulders which were threatening to crunch me. I already had passed through these initiatic ordeals in ancient times, but I had to recapitulate them in order to return onto the straight path from which I had retired. Next, I was dressed with a tunic of white linen, and the Tau cross was hung from my neck and placed upon my chest. I entered as any neophyte in spite of being a bodhisattva. I had to pass through rigorous studies and esoteric disciplines, and when I arrived to the 9th door, the great mysteries of sex were taught unto me. Still I remember those instants in which my guru, after profound explanations, while fixedly staring at me, told me with a solemn voice, "Uncover your shasher, phallus." Then from his lips to my ears, he communicated to me the unutterable secret of the great arcanum, the sexual connection of the lingam yoni without the ejaculation of the Ens Seminis. Afterwards, he brought a vestal dressed with a yellow tunic, and all of her was filled with an extraordinary beauty. I performed the work with her. I practiced the Maithuna, White Tantrism, in accordance with the instructions of my master. "This practice is marvelous," I said. Thus, I descended into the 9th sphere. This is how I performed the great work. The objective was to build the solar bodies and to awaken and develop the serpentine fire of the occult anatomy. In that epoch, there were sacred prostitutes inside the temples, special vestals. The celibate male initiates were working with these vestals. In this day and age, such women inside of the lemisials would not be beneficial. They would be scandalous. Therefore, in this day and age, the Maithuna, sex yoga, can only and must only be practiced between husband and wife, within legitimate, constituted marriages. In the ancient Egypt of the pharaohs, those who were violating their oaths and were divulging the great arcanum were condemned to the death penalty. Their heads were cut off. Their hearts were torn out, their bodies were cremated, and finally their ashes were thrown to the four winds. The mysterious rune K represents the priestess woman and also the flaming sword with complete exactitude. The rune Calm with its Kabbalistic 6 vibrates with maximum intensity within the sphere of Venus, the planet of love. Men and women of the world, you must know that in order to put in activity that annular serpentine fire in the body of the ascetic is only possible with the Maithuna. We need with immediate urgency to learn how to wisely manipulate the eternal feminine principle of the solar forces. We must remember the eagle with a woman's head, the Sun Lady, the diamantine foundation of the great work of the Father. First of all, we must transmute the lead into gold, and later, we need to build diamonds of the best quality. Decidedly, the rune Rita influences the masculine endocrinal glands, but the rune Kaum exercises its influence upon the feminine glands. There exist within the labyrinth of all theories many contortionists of Hatha Yoga. Those acrobatic people suppose that they can exclude the Maithuna and self-realize themselves in depth without the necessity of descending into the 9th sphere. Those contortionistic mystics believe that based on such recreation or absurd gymnastics, they can build the solar bodies and reach the second birth. A certain time ago, I had the high honor of being invited to a secret council of the Great White Lodge. So, I must clearly tell the world that Hatha Yoga was disqualified, it was reproved, it was condemned as authentic and legitimate black magic of the worst type. The esoteric rectors of humanity do not accept, they will not ever accept the absurd frolics of Hatha Yoga. Whoever truly wants the in-depth self-realization must transmute the sexual hydrogen C12 by means of sex yoga, in order to build with it the solar bodies, the wedding garment of the soul. It becomes absolutely impossible to incarnate the real being, if we have not previously built the bodies of gold in the forge of the Cyclops. To walk with firmness upon the path of the razor's edge is urgent. The hour of following the path of the perfect matrimony has arrived. Remember that our motto is Thelema, willpower. The mysteries of the rune Calm gloriously shine in the bottom of the ark, awaiting for the instant for them to be accomplished. Chapter 35. The Purgatorial Region. The eagle with plumage of pure gold, which took away Ganymedes in order to bring him to Olympus, so he could serve as a cupbearer to the gods. Has always the custom of hunting in the purgatorial region. This majestic bird of the spirit, while making marvelous turns, terrific descents like lightning, takes away the soul to the sphere of the fire in order to burn with her. Thus, they are both converted into a living flame. Let us remember the powerful Achilles who turned with fear because he did not know where he was. This is because his mother took him away from Chiron and transported him asleep to the island of Scyros, where later the Greeks found him and took him away. Those times in which I abandoned the Averno in order to enter into the purgatorial region comes to my memory. My mother, converted into a Mater Dolorosa, had already instructed me in depth. She had navigated with me on the boat of Charon, she had demonstrated to me the dissolution of the pluralized I, and finally she had taught me that when the mind is deprived from the ego, the mind still continues with evil tendencies. O God of mine! When the pluralized I is dissolved, it leaves in the mind its seeds of perdition. The yogis say that there is the need to burn the seeds, to incinerate them, to reduce them to cosmic dust. It is urgent to know that the I is reborn again like an evil weed from its own seeds. I needed then to incinerate those evil seeds of a poisonous weed. It was necessary for me to enter into the purgatorial region of the inferior molecular world in order to burn the seed plot of myself close to the top. I reached a point from where I saw a gate. It first appeared to be merely a gap, a break within the wall, and leading up to it there were 3 steps, each one a different color. Over that terrible gate I saw engraved with indelible characters the word purgatory. I then saw the silent figure of someone on guard. I saw that genie standing on the highest step. He was an angel of extraordinary beauty, imposing, severe and terribly divine. In his right hand he held a naked sword, which was dazzlingly reflecting its rays. Everyone who intends to penetrate into the purgatorial region must devoutly prostrate himself at the feet of this angel, and in mercy's name he must make supplications to him to open it. Prior to this, one has to smote his breast 3 times. Unforgettable and terrible moments are those in which the angel inscribes on the forehead of the initiate the letter P 7 times. Then, one listens from his lips the following phrase, "Once entered here, be sure you cleanse away these wounds." Do you remember the case of the wife of Lot? She became converted into a pillar of salt because she looked back from behind her husband. As well, the angel of the purgatory warns that whosoever turns to look back after having entered into the inferior molecular world loses his work, and goes back out again from where he came. This signifies absolute repentance. Not to commit the same error of the past again, not to commit delinquency. Whosoever turns to look back, fails, repeats the same errors, returns into the same sinning past, does not purify himself. Everyone who turns to look back converts himself into a purgatorial failure. Once in the purgatory, one has to march ahead with firmness. One comprehends how absurd arrogance and pride is when within the inferior molecular region. We are nothing else but simple chrysalides, miserable slugs from the mud of the earth, inside which the heavenly butterfly could be formed, based on tremendous intimate super efforts. But there is not a law and order for this to be fulfilled. Those chrysalides could become lost, and this is what is most common. How stubborn are those individuals who suffer the unutterable when they see happiness in any given person? Why would they place their hearts in that which requires an exclusive possession? Vidi pacifici, the ones who lack of a sinning anger. Unfortunately, the rage, the anger can disguise itself within the toga of a judge or with a smile of forgiveness. Thus, each defect is multifarious. We frightfully suffer within the fire of lust while in the purgatorial region because we revive within those submerged subconsciousness regions all of the pleasures of carnal passion. However, this causes profound pain within us. Adhicit pavimento anima mea. Poor souls who were attached to terrene things, how they suffer within the purgatorial region. People of the purgatorial region, I tell you, remember Pygmalion, whose gluttonous thirst of gold made him a traitor, robber, and even what is worse, a parricide. What would we say of the misery of the avaricious Midas, who became converted into a ridiculous personage throughout the innumerable centuries because of his absurd petitions. What would we say of laziness? It is a siren who distracts mariners on the wide sea of existence. She was the one who lay Ulysses aside from his course. A loathsome, exhaling smell is what goes out of her belly. Gluttons from the purgatory. Behold Boniface, who waved the crozier of numerous flock. Behold also Miser Marchesi, who had only a short time of thirst before inebriating at Forli, yet so was one never sated. Remember those unblessed creatures of the clouds, how with their twofold bosoms overgorged were opposed in fight to Theseus. Let us call to mind the Hebrews. How effeminately they stooped to ease their thirst where Gideon's ranks were thinned, marching down the hills to Midian. So, I saw frightful things within the purgatory. When reviving all of my bestialities of ancient times in this region, truly, I felt myself converted into a swine. One given day among others, while conversing with a fellow soul of the purgatory, I told her, "Sister of mine, we have become as swines in this place." She answered me, "Thus ills, we have become as swine in this place." The time was passing by, and I was suffering the unutterable while incinerating malignant seeds, while eliminating filthy things. Many fellow souls of this purgatorial region were looking as decomposing cadavers. Lying down on their beds, they were painfully eliminating seeds, horrifying filthy larvae and evil tendencies. Those poor souls were sighing and also moaning. I was never forgetting my Divine Mother. I always beseeched her to help me in this purgatorial work, to eliminate from me this or that psychological defect. The fight against myself was terrible. Finally, one night, the blessed goddess Mother Kundalini, disguised as a man, entered within the purgatorial region. I intuitively recognized her. "Why did you disguise yourself as a man?" I asked her. "In order to enter into these regions," was her answer. "When are you going to take me out of here?" She, the adorable one, then established a date and hour. "Afterwards, the televiewed instruction will come," she continued, saying. It is clear that I understood everything. Various details were confirming the words of my mother, since the 7 Ps already had been erased little by little, one by one. The purifications were evident, manifest, clear, and positive. Chapter 36. The Temple of Hercules. The sanctuary of Hercules, the Christ, which gloriously shone in the submerged Atlantis, was a resplendent companion to the marvelous temple of Jagrannath, of whose so many marvels A. Snyder wrote about in the formidable work entitled La Création et ses Mysteries. Such unforgettable times of profound poetry are those in which the king Evander eloquently explained to Aeneas, the eminent Trojan man, all the delectable enchantments of the sacred banquet offered in honor of Hercules. If the god Vulcan, the third Logos, truly deserves a lot of praise, then what would we say of the Lord, the Christ, the second Logos, Hercules? The chorus of young warriors sang in the sacred banquet, hymning praise to the Lord, Hercules, and his great deeds, enumerating with exceptional beauty the way he endured all of his labors. When he was still a child, Hercules seized and throttled all the poisonous snakes which were the first monsters sent against his life. Let us remember King Herod and the slaying of all the innocent children. Hercules slaughtered the Lernaean Hydra, that is to say, the tempting serpent of Eden, the horrifying viper from the sinister temple of the goddess Kali. With the sacred fire, Hercules cleaned the stables of Augeas, that is to say, the 49 subconscious regions of the human mind, where all of the beasts of desire horrifyingly abide. Hercules killed the huge lion of Nemea, that is to say, he eliminated or extinguished the Luciferan fire, and also dragged Cerberus, the infernal watchdog of Orcus, the sexual instinct, from the darkness into the light. Hercules is certainly admirable, and worthy of all praise and glory. To think, O God, that Hercules always repeats his labors each time he comes into the world is terrific, grandiose. It is clear, and by all means it is evident that in order to incarnate Hercules within ourselves, we must firstly work in the flaming forge of Vulcan, the sex. Woe to the Samson of the Kabbalah if he permits himself to be put asleep by Delilah. The Hercules of science, who exchanges his royal scepter for the distaff of Omphale, will soon experience the vengeance of Deianira. And nothing will be left for him but the pyre of Mount Ida, in order to escape the devouring folds of the Code of Nessus. From the heights of the rock Tarpeia, all of those who betray Hercules are precipitated into the bottom of the abyss. There, in those times of the submerged Atlantis, the Temple of Hercules was erected upon a rocky boulder. The extraordinary and marmoreal Perron, which was giving access into the temple, its cyclopean and imponent mass was truly making this sanctuary like a precious twin brother to the Temple of Philo in Upper Egypt and to other many venerated Mayan, Nahoa and Aztec sanctuaries. If we think at least for a moment in the City of the Gods, Teotihuacan, Mexico, and in the secret paths and subterranean crypts of that sacred place, ignored by tourists, then we must not ever forget the colossal constructions beneath the Temple of Hercules. Certainly, a royal portico was opened beneath the posterior front of the temple that had 12 zodiacal god statues. These were clearly symbolizing the 12 faculties of the human being and the 12 saviors of whom the great Kabir Jesus so wisely spoke about. Ancient traditions state that such a portico was similar to the celebrated House of the Dwarf, also called House of the Magi, Great Teocalli, or House of God, in Mexico. The initiates were reverently and timorously entering under that terrific portico, and they were passing beneath the columns of Hercules. Such columns were of pure gold, and upon them were engraved the words Adam Kadmon with sacred characters. The know very well about the J and B, plus ultra. 7 auric steps upon where the initiate descended were conducing him to a rectangular precinct. That mysterious place was found wholly revested with pure gold, and was exactly in correspondence with the superior hall, which was always opened to the supplications of the profane world. This was the chamber of the sun, but 4 other chambers existed, and the mysteries were shining in all of them. The second crypt was ineffable. 5 descending flights of silvery tin. The sacred metal of Brihaspati, Jupiter or Io, were reaching into it. The planets Mars and Venus were shining in the third crypt. The red coloration of one and the foamy white of the other were giving to that environment a pinky and very beautiful tint. Of the 7 solar palaces, the third one in Christian and Jewish Kabbalah is related to Lucifer Venus, which make of it the abode of Samael. The Occidental allegorical Titans are in themselves also intimately related with Lucifer Venus. Thus, Sukra, in other words, the regent of the planet Venus, is the one who incarnated in the earth as Usanas, and is known as Uriel in Hebrew. He gave perfect laws to the inhabitants of this world. Disgracefully, these perfect laws were disregarded and rejected in later ages. I knew Usanas or Uriel in the polar continent, during the first root race. He wrote a precious book with runic characters. Lucifer is the fatal negative aspect of Venus. Venus always shines at dawn, but the Luciferan forces are terribly agitated at dawn. Venus is truly the major brother, the messenger of the light for the earth, in the physical as well as in the mystical sense. Saturn and Moon glowing face to face upon the altar, were always shining in the 4th initiatic chamber of the Temple of Hercules. It is urgent to remember that the 2 paths from the Atlantean epoch, the dexterous and sinister, were clearly shown, and their struggles of more than 800,000 years are symbolically sung in that oriental poem of the Great War or the Mahabharata. So, by descending a little more, the Atlantean initiates were penetrating into the 5th crypt, the one of Hermes, or Mercury, who was splendidly glittering upon the altar. Mercury, as an astrological planet, is the nuncio and wolf of the sun, Solaris Luminis Particeps. Mercury is the chief and evoker of souls, the arch-magi and arch-hierophant. The unhappy souls who are precipitated into the Orcus, Limbus, can be summoned to a new life by Mercury, who holds in his dexterous hand the caduceus or hammer with 2 serpents. Tun virgum capit hac animus al evocat orco, in order to initiate them into the celestial militia. Remember that within Limbus live many saints, wise men and sweet maidens who believed in achieving the inner self-realization of the being without sexual magic. Poor souls! They did not work in the forge of the Cyclops, they did not build the solar bodies, the wedding garment of the soul. Blessed be the one who comprehends in an integral way the wisdom of the 5 crypts of the Temple of Hercules. Chapter 37. Rune Hegel. Let us now talk of elementals, gods and devas, sparks and flames. May the muses inspire us. May we play the lyre of Orpheus? Let us remember the old Tiber himself, rising as a mist from within the waters of the river, which has his name in order to speak to Aeneas. O you who are born of the race of the gods, who are bringing back to us the city of Troy saved from its enemies, who are preserving its citadel Pergamum for all time, long have we waited for you in the land of the Laurentines and the fields of Latium. This is the home that is decreed for you. This is the home decreed for the gods of your household. Do not give up. Do not be intimidated by the threat of war. All the angry passions of the gods are now spent. But come now, so that you may not think what you are seeing is an empty dream. I tell you that you will find a great sow with a litter of 30 piglets lying beneath ilex trees on a shore. There she will lie all white on the ground, and the young around her udders will be white. This will be a sign that after 3 times 10 years revolve, Ascanius will find the city of Alba, white in name and bright in glory. What I prophesy will surely come to pass. Attend now, I shall teach you in few words how you may triumphantly resolve the difficulties that lie before you. The Arcadians are a race descended from Pallas. They came to these shores following the standards of their king Evander, chose a site here and established in these hills a city called Pallanteum after their founder Pallas. This people waged continual war with the Latin race. Welcome them into your camp as your allies. Make a treaty with them. I will take you to them straight up my river between these banks, and you will be able to row upstream into the current. Up with you then, son of the goddess, for the first stars are beginning to set. Offer due prayers to Juno and overcome her angry threats with vows and supplications. To me you will give honor and make repayment when you are victorious. I am that full river whom you see scouring these banks and cutting through the rich farmland. I am the river Thybris, blue as the sky and favored of heaven. Here is my great home. My headwaters rise among lofty cities. So spoke the river god and plunged to the bottom of a deep pool. Certainly, Virgil, the poet of Mantua, tells us that when this vision of Tiber vanished, Aeneas awoke, rose, then after rubbing his eyes, he ran around to see if he could discover the sign that the sublime elder had spoken about. Concretely, before his astonished eyes there appeared an omen. Through the trees he caught sight of a great white sow with a litter of 30 piglets, all of the same color. This was enough for him to state that the predictions of the god Tiber, an elemental deva from the sacred Italian river, had become totally fulfilled. These were times in which our Aryan root race still had not entered into the descending, involuted cycle. The human mind had yet to be poisoned by the materialistic skepticism of the 18th centuries. The people had faith in their visions, and they were rendering cult to the elemental gods of nature. Jinn lands do exist, paradises where the wolf and the lamb, men and gods live together. Yes, this is obvious. Let us remember the monk Barantu who returned to his country after navigating for a period of time and told Brendan that beyond the Stone Mount was the Island of Delights. This was where his disciple Merlock and many other religious members of his order had retired. He then said that even further towards the Occident, passing a thick mist, another island was shining with eternal light. This island was the promised land for the saints. It is clear that Brendan did not have to hear this story twice. Filled with intense faith and a holy zeal, he embarked himself in a boat of osier that was revested with curried and bituminous skins. With him were 17 religious monks, and one amongst them was the young Saint Malo, one of his most illustrious disciples. Patiently navigating towards the tropic, they made a stop on a very craggy and hospitable island. Then they arrived to another island, rich in land animals and freshwater fish, and shining with light and beauty. They arrived to another island without beaches, neither sand or banks, where they were determined to celebrate Easter, Massachusetts. However, it turned out that this land was a big whale or perhaps a gigantic cachalot. They proceeded ahead in their navigation until Pentecost on the paradise of birds, where their eyes enjoyed the abundance of leaves and flowers and their ears the singing of colored birds. Strong winds kept them many months on the ocean, until arriving to another island, which was inhabited by Cenobites, who had St. Patrick and St. Albio as patrons. They remained there from Christmas until Epiphany. They spent a year in these peregrinations, and in the 6 following months, they gathered themselves for Christmas on the island of St. Patrick and St. Albio. They were on the island of the sheep during the Holy Week, they were upon the back of the whale during Easter resurrection, and on the island of the birds for Pentecost. Still, they had not arrived to the island of delights, from where Murnoch had taken Barintu into the promised land. Strange and mysterious adventures proceeded with the most curious events. So, our heroes successively fought in the 7th year, with a whale, with a griffin, and with the Cyclops. They saw other islands, one among them was very flat and was producing big red fruits. This island was inhabited by a populace who called themselves the Strong Men. Another island was embalmed with the fragrance of those vines which were bending the trees that produced them. They celebrated Christmas again in the accustomed place, and afterwards they navigated towards the north, avoiding in this way the terrible rocky island, a bleak, windy spot where the Cyclops had their forges. The next day, they saw a mountain sending such a spray of sparks and embers that its whole summit was ablaze. This was the Hell Island, without a doubt. Such a place was not the one searched for by St. Brendan and his companions. Therefore, they sailed south and disembarked on a small and round island, which was deprived of vegetation, and which was inhabited upon its summit by a hermit, who filled them with benedictions. They celebrated the Holy Week, Easter resurrection, and Pentecost where it was customary for them. Departing from that repetitive circle, they passed through the zone of obscurity which surrounds the island of saints, and which appeared before them filled with precious stones, autumn-like fruits, and illuminated by a perpetual day. In short, they wandered for 40 days on that island without finding a limit to it. Upon a shore of a river which was crossing the island, an angel told them that they could not pass ahead and that they should return the same way they came. So consequently, they repassed the darkness. They rested 3 days on the Island of Delights, and after the benediction of the abbot of that monastery, they returned directly to Ireland, without noticing with exactitude what it was that had just occurred. These tales, placed between quotations, comes from Sigberto of Gemblers and Sirio the Cartujo. All you worthy ones, those who have reached the second birth, have dissolved the ego and have sacrificed themselves for humanity's sake, listen to me, please. Upon the living rock, right there, on the beach, you must trace with a reed the rune Hegel. Then, you must call the little boat of the sacred swan. This is how you can embark yourselves to the mysterious islands of the 4th dimension. Afterwards, when this sacred sign, this marvelous rune has been traced, you must chant the following mantras: Akaksukanak, Aksharaxan, Aknoya, Ziraxi, Iguaya, Hiraji. Look fixedly at the holy rune Hegel, and with your heart filled with faith, beseech, ask unto the Roman Harpy, the Nordic Urwala, the Scandinavian Erda, the primeval Sibyl of the earth, your own divine mother Kundalini, to send for you the extraordinary little boat moved by the sylphs. Ah! How joyful you will be when you embark upon the mysterious boat of the sacred swan towards the mysterious islands of Eden. But to you, the beginners, I advise you to render cult unto the holy gods, to work with the creatures of fire, air, water, and earth. You must not forget your divine mother Kundalini, since without her you cannot progress in this sacred science. You must remember that God has no name and that he is only an inhalation, a sigh, the incessant eternal breath, profoundly unknown to itself. This breath, by all means, is the principle of the logos, of all the runes, and of all words. Practice. Beloved disciples, you must profoundly meditate on the unity of life, on the great alaya of the universe, on the invisible world, on the parallel universes of the superior dimensions of space. Concentrate your thought on the Valkyrias, gods of fire, air, water, and earth. Agni is the god of fire. Haralda is the god of air. Verena is the god of water. Gob is the god of the element earth. Through meditation is how you can enter into contact with the gods of the elements. You must trace the rune Hegel on a blank paper, then after, concentrate your mind on any of the 4 principal gods of the elements. Call upon them so they can help you when it is necessary. Final commentary. How can we forget Zacapili, the god of happiness, music, dance, and flowers? Among the Aztecs, and Tlaloc, the god of the rain, who still is gloriously shining among the Nahuas. This elemental god lives in the parallel universe of the conscious will. The human sacrifices were not my fault, he said, when we were recriminating him about it. Then, he added, I will return in the Aquarian age. What can we say about Ejecatl, the god of wind? This elemental deva of the Aztecs was precisely the one who cooperated in the resurrection of Jesus, by inducing activity and movement into the body of the Master. We, the Gnostics, still render cult to the gods of the tender and ripe corn. We know very well Camazotz, the Aztec bat god. This angel lives in the parallel universe of the cosmic will and works in the 4th dimension with the angels of death. We love the elemental gods of the ancient Egypt of the pharaohs, and we will never forget the millenary Sphinx. The rune Hegel and deep meditation will permit us to be put in contact with those sparks, with those ineffable flames. Chapter 38. The River Lethe. The Divine Mother Kundalini always accomplishes her word. Therefore, I waited with supreme patience for the given day, date, and hour. The purgatorial region is very painful, and I wanted to leave from there. I was longing for my emancipation. Katon, the angel of purgatory, fights in those molecular regions for the soul's freedom. This angel greatly suffered when he lived in this world. Any initiate knows that when in Utica, Africa, this being was a man who preferred death, instead of living under the chains of slavery. I also wanted liberty, therefore I asked for it, and it was granted unto me. Each time that a soul abandons the purgatorial region, an intense joy originates within the heart of Katon. So, the longed-for moment arrived. Since I had known the temporal and eternal fire and had departed from abrupt ways and from narrowness, I had to encounter the sun inside of my own soul. Thus, I felt that from the unknown, something mysterious was forcing, straining the intimate atomic doors of my interior universe. My fears were useless, vain was the resistance, it was compelling me, constraining me, pressing me, and finally, O God of mine. I felt myself transformed. The cosmic Christ had entered within me. But my individuality? Where had it gone? What had happened to my vain human personality? Where was it? Only remembrances of the Holy Land were coming into my memory. The humble birth in the stable of the world, the baptism in the river Jordan, the fast in the wilderness, the transfiguration, Jerusalem, the beloved city of the prophets, the human multitudes of those times, the doctors of the law, the Pharisees, the Sadducees, etc. I was floating in the surrounding environment of the temple. I courageously advanced towards a table before which the modern Caiaphases, the most high dignitaries of the failing church, were seated. They were revested with their sacerdotal habits, and the cross was hanging from their necks. They were projecting, planning, tracing insidious and perfidious plans against me in secrecy. You thought that I would not return, but I am here again. This was the only thing that occurred to me to utter. Moments later, the Lord had gone out of me, and I again felt myself an individual. Then, together with Lytolantes, I rested for brief moments at the foot of my cross. I cannot deny that lamentably the thorns of the heavy crosspiece were hurting me, and I had a brief discussion with Lytolantes about it. Afterwards, she and I advanced towards the platform of the temple. A master took the floor in order to say that Christ has no individuality and that he incarnates and manifests himself inside any man who is properly prepared. It is clear that the word man is extremely demanding. Diogenes did not find a single man in Athens. The intellectual animal is not a man, human being. In order to become one needs to be dressed with the wedding garment of the soul, the famous to soma heliakon, the body, or better if we say, the bodies of the solar man. Fortunately, I built those bodies of gold in the forge of the Cyclops, in the flaming forge of Vulcan. Hercules had repeated all of his tasks, all of his labors, inside of me. He had to strangle all of the poison serpents which wanted to take his life when he was still a child. He had to decapitate the Hydra of Lerna, to clean the stable of Augeas, to kill the lion of Nemea, to take out Cerberus the infernal dog from within the frightful Tartarus, etc. Hercules, the Christ, practices what he teaches, and each time when he incarnates inside of a man, he repeats the whole of his cosmic drama. This is why the Lord is the Master of Masters. It is written that the Son of Man has to descend into the atomic infernos of nature. It is written that the Son of Man has to ascend to heaven, after passing through the purgatorial region. The Son of Man has to carefully submerge himself within the waters of Lethe in order to reconquer innocence. With great urgency, we need to forget the sinful and absurd past, which is the origin of much bitterness. The Lethean, are certainly, and without the least bit of doubt, a single river of clear and profound waters. On one side, its waters delectably descend singing upon its rocky bed, carrying the marvelous virtue which erases the memory of sin, the remembrances of myself. Its name is Lethe. The other so holy and sublime shore has the delectable enchantment of fortifying virtues, and its name is Juno. It is obvious that the tenebrous remembrances of too many yesterdays must be erased, because, to our own disgrace, they have the tendency of actualizing, projecting themselves into the future through the alley of the present. In the name of truth, I have to say that the profound work within the waters of Lethe is frightfully difficult and more bitter than bile. The matter of passing beyond the body, affections, and the mind is not easy. Too many beloved shadows live within time. The memories of desire persist, they refuse to die, they do not want to disappear. But what about sex? The Maithuna? Sex yoga? Then what, O God of mine? The twice-born already know very well that they cannot return into the flaming forge of Vulcan. It is obvious that the Maithuna is vital, cardinal, and definitive in order to build the wedding garment of the soul, the Tisoma Heliacon. However, any initiate knows that this is only the inferior work of the initiation. Sex is forbidden for the Son of Man, this is known by the gods, and as thus it is written. First, we must work with the third logos in the ninth sphere, until reaching the second birth, which the great Kabir Jesus spoke of to the Rabbi Nicodemus. Afterwards, we need to work with the second logos, and then sex is prohibited. The error of many pseudo-esoterists and pseudo-occultists, monks and anchorites, consists of renouncing sex without having previously built the solar bodies in the forge of the Cyclops. These sincere mistaken ones want to work with the second logos, without previously having worked with the third logos. Behold, here is their mistake. The definitive and radical sexual abstention is only commendatory for the twice-born. For the Son of Man, whosoever is admitted into the temple of the twice-born must dissolve the ego, must incinerate the seeds of the eye, and must bathe in the waters of Lethe. This is known by the gods, the sparks, the flames, the resplendent dragons of wisdom. Truly, no one could pass beyond the sex, the affections, and the mind, without previously having bathed within the waters of Lethe. After the second birth, we need to tear the sexual Adamic veil, or veil of Isis, into pieces in order to penetrate into the great mysteries. Children of the earth, listen to your instructors, who are the children of the fire. Adepts of the light. You must invoke your divine mother Kundalini, and then submerge yourselves into the profound waters of Lethe. Chapter 39. The Nymphs. Iris, divine ineffable maiden, messenger goddess of winged feet, you are the one who protects initiate women who work in the flaming forge of Vulcan. Was it perhaps not you, O sublime beauty, who delivered the celestial message from Juno, goddess of initiate matrons, to bold Turnus, the warring Rutulian chief commander? After the solemn libations, the warlike Turnus, as a new Achilles, was soon moving threateningly across the open Trojan plain with his whole army. This is how it is written and known by the divine and humans. However, the Trojans were neither tardy nor weak. They reunited themselves at once in the army room, and with a great clamor they streamed into the battle line. Terrorizing, dantesque and dreadful was Turnus, who prowled round the Trojan walls in a fury, going one way and another. It was a strange destiny to repeat in Latium the same epic combats of defeated Troy. Nevertheless, this time the Trojans, in spite of being veterans of many wars, did not commit themselves to a fair fight with the enemy on the level plain, because of Aeneas' absence. For these were the orders they had received from Aeneas, the greatest of warriors, as he left them. What later happened is known by the legend of the centuries. The fire. The flames, the blazing torches crackled threateningly. The Rutulians, blazing with anger, wanted to burn Aeneas' fleet. But Cybele herself, the divine mother Kundalini, is said to have beseeched the help of the cosmic Christ, great Jupiter, son of Kronos, and thus Jupiter helped the Trojans. Fortunately, those ships were made with the sacred wood of pines, from trees gladly given to the Trojan warrior upon the holy mount of Ida, where the Christ, Jupiter, had his favorite forest. Oh, the astonishment! Oh, the marvel! In an instant, each one of these mysterious ships, instead of burning as a fatal holocaust, was miraculously changed into a nymph of the immense sea. Ah, if only the human mind had not degenerated so greatly! Many times I, myself, have seen tender maidens dressed as brides, as if ready for their wedding celebration. Yes, O God! I have seen these innocent souls at the foot of each pine. Truth? Yes, these are plant elementals. These are truly the elementals of the pines. Each one of these Christmas trees has its own soul. When will the Christ cultists once again establish their sanctuaries within the forest filled with pines? Do these trees have powers? Who would dare to doubt it? Could perhaps the warriors of Turnus, the new Achilles, have turned the Trojan fleet into a holocaust? If people could awake consciousness, then they could converse face to face with the nymphs of the boisterous ocean. If people could awake consciousness, then they could talk with the elementals of the pines. Nevertheless, oh what pain! O God of mine! These poor people are profoundly asleep. Ah! If those who investigate in the field of occultism could truly comprehend the author of the Metamorphosis of Plants, if they could understand Humboldt with his cosmoses, if truly they could intuit Timaeus and Critias of Plato the divine, then they would approach the amphitheater of the cosmic science, and they would penetrate into the mystery of the magic of plants. If those who study occult anatomy could comprehend the mysteries of Devi Kundalini, if truly they would love Cybele and divine Jupiter, if they would work in the ninth sphere, then they would be admitted into the elemental paradises of nature. Let us now remember the chorus of the nymphs of Calypso, in the very occult work of Telemachus of Fenelon. The fairies spread on the moss of a millenary rock a fine lace tablecloth. Its beautiful figure could be compared to those subtle textiles which are formed sometimes by the cirrus in the sky. Right upon it was placed factored Atlantean ware which had colors that brought remembrances of the Talavaranian zone, which was in fashion a few years earlier, from afar. They served them a meal of frugal appearance, but which was so nutritive that it seemed to fill all of them with happiness and youth. Wheat, rye, honey syrup, corn, cocoa, walnut, kola nut, sapari bread are what the Hindustani adepts give as a sign of alliance to their disciples. The honey, the non-fermented must, 1,000 juices and undescribable molasses constituted their dishes. These were delicious dishes that not even Brillat Savarin had ever tasted, and that neither Montino and Altamira would ever reach to comprehend. A certain fragrant liquor that was served in an agate cup, which was evoking memories of the Holy Grail, placed this group of brethren into a mysterious and strange state in the end. They were joyful, happy, and filled with vigor and youth, capable of embarking without any fear into the most terrible adventure. It is relevant to say that this group explored Atlantis and knew all the mysteries of that submerged continent. I also knew 2 other marvelous nymphs when I was navigating on a sail ship in the Caribbean Sea. They came to encounter us through the boisterous waves. They were of an incomparable beauty. One of them, a delicate maiden, had the color of violets. She was floating over the waters, sometimes walking with a rhythmical and innocent step, sweetly approaching, agile and simple. She was without anything of animal, yet she had a lot of divinity. She looked rather like an Indian female with bare feet. The other one had the marvelous color of coral. Within the cordial shape of her mouth, a strawberry left its purplish red, and in the subtle delicate draw of that visage, her eyes were shining. The aurora was dawning upon the ocean. I saw them, and when uttering the verb of light, they spoke to me. Then, very slowly, they approached the beach and rose upon the cliffy rocks. I became a friend of these two marvelous nymphs, and when I think in their powers and in those changed ships of Aeneas, I then submerge myself into meditation and prayer. Chapter 40. Rune Note. Truly, it is indispensable in this 1968 to 1969 Christmas message to deeply study the famous rune note. Let us continue studying this matter of karma. Listen to me, beloved reader. One day, it does not matter which one, Rafael Ruiz Ochoa and my insignificant person were coming back from the picturesque city of Tasca, Guerrero, of the Republic of Mexico. We were going to the Federal District, capital of Mexico, in a ramshackle vehicle, which, due to the unbearable weight of years, was roaring frightfully with tremendous noise and clatter. To see this old and decrepit vehicle running was intriguing. Frequently, like something dantesque, it horrifyingly and dreadfully overheated. And only my friend Raphael had the patience to deal with it. Once in a while, we were stopping in the shadow of some tree of the road in order to put water in the vehicle and to cool it a bit. This was a duty for my friend Raphael, as I preferred to take advantage of those instants in order to submerge myself into profound meditation. I now remember something very interesting. While seated near the road, out of that curious, very old vehicle, I saw some insignificant ants which assiduously and diligently were circulating everywhere. Suddenly, I resolved to put order into my mind and to concentrate my attention exclusively on one of them. Afterwards, I passed into meditation and finally ecstasy, samadhi, or that which in Zen Buddhism is denominated satori, came unto me. What I experienced was extraordinary, marvelous, formidable. I could verify the existing intimate relationship between the ant and that which Leibniz named the monad, spirit. Certainly, it becomes obvious to integrally comprehend that such a directrix monad is not incarnated or inserted inside the body of the ant. It is clear that this monad lives out of its physical body. However, it is connected to its dense vehicle by means of the silver cord. Such a cord is the thread of life, the septuple antakarana of the Hindustani. It is something magnetic and subtle that has the power of extending or prolonging itself until the infinite. Truly, such a monad of that insignificant ant, which was observed in detail by me, seemed to be a beautiful 12-year-old girl. She was dressed with a white tunic and was carrying over her shoulders a dark blue-colored cape. Much has been spoken about Marguerite Gautier, but this girl was more ineffable and beautiful. Her eyes were of an evocative beauty, her gestures like that of a prophetess. There was on her the sacred fragrance of the altar. Her innocent smile was like that of the Mona Lisa, and with such lips that no one in heaven or earth would dare to kiss. So, what is that which the girl said? Terrible things. She spoke to me about her karma, certainly, very horrifying karma. We conversed very carefully. Inside the vehicle, she entered in by herself, and when seated, she invited me to conversation. I humbly seated myself beside her. We, the ants, said this monad, have been punished by the lords of karma, and we suffer a lot. Now it is opportune to remember the legends of the giant ants from Tibet, which are referred to by Herodotus and Plinius, Herodotus, Historiam Book 11. Plinius, Natural History, Book 3. Of course, O God of mine, it would be difficult on the first attempt to imagine Lucifer as a bee, or the Titans as ants. But it is clear that these creatures also had their downfall. This downfall in itself was of the same nature as the error committed by Adam. Many centuries before the first root race appeared upon the face of the earth, those non-human creatures which today are named ants and bees were living on this world. These creatures knew in depth good from evil and evil from good. Certainly, and in the name of truth, I have to say that they were old souls. They had evolved greatly, but never in life had they entered onto the path of the revolution of the consciousness. It is obvious that evolution can never conduce anyone to the intimate self-realization. It is normal that every evolution is inevitably followed by an involution. Every rising is followed by a setting, every ascension is followed by a descent. These creatures came to renounce the idea of a superior knowledge and of the esoteric circle of life. Thus, they established their faith on such gibberish as that of a Marxist-Leninist type, similar to that of the Soviet Union. Their way of understanding was undoubtedly more mistaken and graver than that of Adam. Therefore, the result is shown before the sight of the entire world. Thus, this is what the ants and bees are. They are involutioning, retarded, and regressive creatures. These beings altered their own organism, they horrifyingly modified it, they made their organism to retrocede in time, until reaching the present state which they are in. Maeterlinck, when referring to the civilization of the termites, he writes, "Their civilization, which is the most ancient amongst all, is the most curious, the most intelligent, the most complex and in a certain way, the most logical and the one which is the most adapted to the difficulties of existence among all the civilizations which have appeared before our own civilization upon the globe. From many points of view, this civilization, even when cruel, sinister, and often repulsive, is superior to that of the bee, to that of the common and current ant, and to that of the human being. Within the termite colony, or nest of white ants, the communist gods convert themselves into insatiable Molochs. The more that is given unto them, the more they demand, and they persist in their demands until the individual is annihilated, and his misery is complete. This frightful tyranny has not been paralleled in humanity, since among us humans, some people benefit at least, but in the termite colony not one benefits. Their discipline is more ferocious than that of the Carmelites or Thripenses. Their voluntary submission to laws and regulations, which comes from who knows where, is such that it does not have a parallel in any human society. This new form of fatality may be the cruelest of all the social fatalities which we, ourselves, are walking towards. It is a society which has been added to those which we already know and that have already sufficiently preoccupied us. They do not rest, except in the very last of their dreams. Sickness is intolerable, and weakness carries with it its own death sentence. Their communism is taken until the limits of cannibalism and coprophagy. Demanding the sacrifice and misery of many for the benefit and happiness of no one, is all for the objective that one species of universal desperation could be continuable, renovative, and multipliable as long as the world is alive. These cities of insects, which appeared on this planet before humans appeared, could serve almost as a caricature of ourselves, as a parody of the terrestrial paradise, towards which the majority of civilized countries walk towards. Thus, Maeterlinck demonstrates in an evident way what is the price of such a type of Marxist-Leninist regimen. They used to have wings, now they do not have them anymore. They do not have eyes, since they have renounced them. They used to have sex, but they have sacrificed this too. To all of this, we have to add that before sacrificing their wings, their sight, and their sex, these white ants, and all ants in general, had to sacrifice their intelligence. If in the beginning an iron dictatorship was necessary in order to establish their abominable communism, afterwards, everything became automatic and their intelligence became atrophied little by little, once displaced by their mechanism. Today, we are astonished when we contemplate a bee's honeycomb or an ant hive, but we only lament that they now lack intelligence and that they have become mechanical. Let us now talk about the forgiveness of sins. Can perhaps karma be forgiven? We say that karma can be forgiven. When an inferior law is transcended by a superior law, the latter has in itself, without a doubt, the extraordinary power of washing away the first one. Nevertheless, there are lost cases, as such of the ants and bees. Such creatures, after having normal personalities, became involuted, they became deformed and diminished themselves, until reaching their present state. I owed karma from previous lives, but I was forgiven. An eminent special encounter with my Divine Mother Kundalini was announced to me. I knew that when arriving at a certain esoteric degree, I was going to be taken to her presence. Certainly, the longed-for day arrived, and I was taken before her. A very exalted adept conducted me towards the sanctuary. O God of mine! Once there, I cried, I prayed. I invoked my adorable one. This cosmic event was extraordinary. She, my adorable mother, came to me. It is impossible to explain what I felt. All of my dear mothers who I have had in all of my distinct reincarnations were represented in her. However, she was beyond all of them. She was my mother, yes, but perfect, ineffable, and terribly divine. The Father had deposited within her all the grace of his wisdom. Christ, the Son, had saturated her with his love, and the Holy Spirit had conferred her with all of his igneous powers. Thus, I could comprehend that in my mother all of wisdom, love, and power were vividly expressing themselves. We sat face to face, she was on one chair and I on another, and so, delectably we conversed as son and mother. How joyful! How happy I was when conversing with my divine mother! I had something to say, and when I spoke I did so with a voice which surprised my very own self. I ask you to forgive me of all of the crimes committed by me in previous lives, since you know that nowadays I would be incapable of falling into the same errors. I know it, my son, replied my mother with a paradisiacal voice filled with infinite love. Not even for $1,000,000 would I commit those errors again, I continued saying to my divine mother Kundalini. What is that about dollars, my son? Why are you saying that? Why are you talking like that? Then, oh God! I felt embarrassed with myself, confused, ashamed, and filled with pain. I answered, pardon me, mother of mine. The problem is that this is the spoken way of that vain and illusory physical world where I live. I comprehend, my son, answered my mother. So, with these words the adorable one returned tranquility and peace unto me. Now, yes, mother of mine, I ask you to bless me and forgive me. I spoke filled with ecstasy. Terrific was the moment in which my mother, on her knees, kneeled with infinite humbleness and filled with wisdom, love, and power, blessed me when saying, my son, you are forgiven. Allow me to kiss your feel, O mother of mine. I cried. Then, O God! When I deposited my mystical kiss upon her sacred feet, she instructed me with a certain symbol, which reminded me of the washing of feet in the Last Supper of the Lord. I understood and comprehended everything in depth. I already had dissolved the pluralized I within the mineral regions, within the infernal worlds of nature, but I needed to burn up the satanic seeds within the inferior molecular world, or purgatorial region. Then after, I had to bathe myself in the rivers of Lethe and Uno in order to erase the memories of evil and fortified virtues. Such has to be done, before having the right to be confirmed in the light. Later, I found myself involved in a potentially painful scene, similar to one from my past life where I had committed a lamentable error. I was very close to being run down by a car within the Federal District, capital city of Mexico. I was completely convinced until satiety that I was already free of karma. I studied my own book of karma in the superior worlds, and I found all of its pages blank. I only found written the name of a mountain on one of them. I comprehended that later I have to live there. Is this a type of karma? I asked unto the lords of karma. This is not a karma, they answered me. You will go to live there, for the good of the great cause. Nonetheless, it is clear that this will not be mandatory for me. The liberty of choosing is granted unto me. At present, I do not owe any karma, yet I have to pay tax unto the lords of the law. Everything has a price, and the right for living in this world must be paid. I pay with good deeds. Therefore, I have presented to the consideration of my readers two cases, the irremediable karma, like that of bees and ants, and the forgiven karma. Let us now talk of negotiations. Let us concretize it with the rune knot. In Masonry, this symbol is taught only to masters, never to beginners. Let us remember the sign for succor for those of the third degree, that is to say, for the masters, The interlaced hands are placed over the head at the level of the forehead, with the palms facing outward, while pronouncing at the same time, "Around me, children of the widow," or, in Hebraic, Ela ibne Almana. All Masons must concur when hearing this cry, in order to aid the brother who is in misfortune and to grant him their protection in all cases and circumstances of life. In Masonry, the rune knot is practiced with the head, and this rune has been, is, and will always be an SOS, a sign for help. As a fact, the rune note in itself signifies danger, but it is obvious that the power for intelligently avoiding this danger resides within the same rune. Those who transit upon the path of the razor's edge are incessantly combated by the tenebrous ones, and so they suffer the unspeakable. Therefore, they can and must defend themselves with the rune note. We can beseech, ask for help to Anubis and his 44 judges of karma with this rune note, in order for them to consider negotiations. We must not complain because of karma, since it is negotiable. Whosoever has capital from good deeds can pay without the necessity of suffering. Practice 1. The practices of the rune note take us to the performing of pranayama. That is to say, to the wise and intelligent combination of solar and lunar atoms. You must profoundly inhale the vital air, the prana, the life, through the right nostril, and exhale it through the left nostril while mentally counting up to 12. Then after, inhale through the left nostril and exhale through the right one, and vice versa. Continue with this exercise for 10 minutes. In this practice, you must control your nostrils with your index finger and your thumb. Afterwards, the Gnostic student must sit down or lay down in dorsal decubitus, on his back, facing upwards. With his body relaxed, he must concentrate and try to remember his past lives. Practice 2. In the case of requiring the assistance of Anubis, if you urgently need to negotiate with him, then you must open your arms to the sides. While in this position, you must form the rune by placing one arm at an angle of 135 degrees and the other arm at an angle of only 45 degrees. Then, the arm which is forming the angle of 45 degrees will move in order to form an angle of 135 degrees, and the other arm will move to form the angle of 45 degrees. During this exercise, you must chant the mantras Na, Ne, Ni, No, Nu, while having your mind concentrated on Anubis, the chief of karma. In this manner, beseech him for the negotiation you wish, and ask him for the help urgently needed. You must observe well the form of the rune note, imitating with your arms this sign. The right and left arms must alternate in their movements. Chapter 41. Parsifal. Now let us talk about the Templar Knights. Let us converse a little bit about these loyal custodians of the Holy Grail. May the gods listen to us. May the muses inspire us. What could we say about the castle of Monsalvat? Let us all sing the hymn of the Grail. Hymn of the Grail. O feast of love undying, from day to day renewed, draw near, as for the last time, to taste this sacred food. Who revels in good deeds this holy feast still feeds. He dares approach the shrine to share this gift divine. For sins of the world with thousand sorrows his sacred blood he offered. To the world's Redeemer with joyful heart, oh, how gladly my blood I proffer. He died, for sin atoning thus, he lives, by death he lives in us. In faith and love, behold the dove, the Saviour's shining token. Take ye the wine, his blood divine, and bread of life here broken. Ye men and gods! Lo, and behold the Grail Knights and their squires. All of them are dressed with white tunics and white cloaks, similar to the Templar Knights. But, instead of the red tau, the symbol of a white dove in soaring flight is displayed with all right on their weapons and embroidered on their cloaks. This is an extraordinary symbol of the third logos, a living sign of the Holy Spirit of Vulcan, that marvelous sexual force with which we can perform many prodigies and marvels. Well, it would be helpful to penetrate within the deep meaning of Wagner's drama. In this drama, Amfortas is a specific type of remorse, Titurel is the voice of the past, Klingsor is the black magician, Parsifal is redemption, Kundry is seduction, and Gurnmans is tradition. In the beginning, the marvelous trombones sound their solemn reveille, and Gurnman sinks to his knees with his 2 squires, joining them in silent morning prayer. 2 strong knights come from the Grail's castle with the evident purpose of exploring the path which Amfortas, the king of the sacred chalice, is going to follow. The old successor of King Titrel comes earlier than he ever has, to bathe himself within the sacred waters of the lake. This is done with the desire of calming the strong pains which are afflicting him since the moment of his own disgrace, when he received a frightful thrust of a lance, a spear which Klingser, the perverse black magician, wounded him with. Sorrowful story is the one of Klingser. Horrifying. He was a sincere mistaken one, as many are in this day and age. He was living as a penitent in a frightful desert. He wanted to be a saint, thus he became an enemy to all that could have sexual savor. He dreadfully fought against the animal passions, he wore bloody sackcloths upon his flagellated body, and he cried a lot. Nevertheless, everything was useless, since his lust, lasciviousness, and his secret impudence, in spite of all his efforts and sacrifices, were swallowing him alive. Therefore, O dear God, being impotent in eliminating his sexual passions, this unhappy man resolved to mutilate, to castrate himself with his own hands. Then after, he beseechingly extended his hands towards the Grail, but he was rejected with indignation by the guardian. This disgraced one believed that by hating the Holy Spirit, by rejecting the 3rd Logos, by destroying the sexual organs, he could be admitted into the castle of Monsalvat. The unhappy one thought that he could be admitted into the order of the Holy Grail without the Maithuna, without previously achieving the 2nd birth, and while being dressed with lunar rags. This poor unfortunate and ill-starred knight supposed that one could enter to work with the 2nd Logos, the Christ, without previously having worked with the 3rd Logos, the Holy Spirit, the sexual fire. To that end, the tenebrous, despairing Klingser unjustly resolved to avenge himself against the noble knights of the Holy Grail. Therefore, he transformed his penitent desert into a bewitched and fatal garden of voluptuous delights, and he filled it with exquisite and diabolical women, dangerously beautiful. Thus there, in that delectable mansion, accompanied with his beauties, he lurked in secrecy for the Grail Knights in order to drag them into concupiscence, which inevitably conduces people towards the infernal worlds. Whosoever allowed himself to be seduced by these provocative she-devils became his victim. Thus, this is how he succeeded in carrying many knights into perdition. Amfortas, king of the Grail, combated this fatal, evil, venturesome Klingser. The king wanted to put an end to this fatal enchanted plague, but he too fell, surrendering to passion within the impudent arms of the lustful Kundry. With such a formidable moment for Klingser, he would have been foolish if he would have lost such an opportunity. Therefore, he audaciously snatched the sacred spear from the hands of Amfortas. Then, while smiling, he triumphantly withdrew. Thus, this is the way in which Amfortas the king of the Grail lost the blessed spear with which Longinus pierced the side of the Lord upon Golgotha. Amfortas, who is also pierced in his side with the frightful wound of remorse, suffers the unspeakable. Kundry, a delectable woman of extraordinary beauty, also suffers with remorse, but she humbly serves the brethren of the Holy Grail. Within the depth, you, Kundry, fatal woman, are nothing but an instrument of perfidy, under the service of that magician from darkness. You want to march throughout the path of light, but, hypnotized, you fail. Amfortas, while submerged within intimate profound meditation, listens in ecstasy to the mysterious words of mystic meaning which come from the Grail, made wise through pity, the blameless fool, the innocent and chaste one, wait for him, the one I choose. Suddenly, something extraordinary happens, something unusual, a great commotion stirs among the people of the Grail. Precisely at the shore of the lake, they have intercepted an ignorant boy, who, errant on those shores, has just wounded to death a swan. A sacred bird of immaculate whiteness. But why so much scandal? To Parsifal, this was an event which had just occurred in the past, which fortunately was washed clean within the precious waters of Lethe. Who has not wounded the sacred swan to death? Who has not wounded the 3rd Logos? Who is the one who has not assassinated the miraculous Hamsa, the Holy Spirit? Who, because of fornication, has not assassinated the phoenix bird of paradise? Who has not sinned against the immortal ibis? Who has not made the holy dove, living symbol of the sexual force, to bleed? It is clear that Parsifal, after suffering greatly, has reached total innocence. He is the son of Herzalide, a poor woman from the forest. Really, he ignores mundane things, because he is protected with his innocence. Klingsor's flower maidens are useless, as these unjoyful ones cannot not seduce such an innocent one. Therefore, they flee defeated. Useless become the seductive efforts of Herodias, Gundrigia, Kundry, as all of her arts fail. Thus, when looking at herself defeated, she cries, asking for help to Klingsor, who in desperation and rage, hurls the sacred spear against Parsifal. Nevertheless, Parsifal is protected by his innocence. Therefore, the spear, instead of piercing his body, remains hanging over Parsifal's head for an instant. Then, the boy grasps the spear with his right hand, and swings this sharp weapon in the blessing sign of the cross. Finally, the castle of Klingsor collapses and sinks within the abyss, converted into cosmic dust. The best comes afterwards, as Parsifal, in company with his guru Gurnmans, enters into the temple of Montserrat, Spain, Cataluna. The doors of the temple are opened, and in solemn procession, all the Knights of the Holy Grail penetrates inside the holy place. They are orderly and with infinite veneration place themselves before two long, cloth-covered tables, which are parallel to each other and which leave an empty space between them. Delectable are those moments in which the mystical supper is celebrated, the cosmic banquet of the Paschal Lamb. Extraordinary are those instants in which the bread and the wine of the transubstantiation are eaten and drank. The blessed chalice in which Joseph of Arimathea collected the blood that poured from the wounds of the Lord upon the Golgotha of all bitterness, gloriously shines during the ritual. Ineffable moments of pleroma are those in which Parsifal miraculously heals the wound of Amfortas by applying on his side the same blessed spear which wounded him before. This spear is a formidable symbol. It is 100% phallic. It is sexual in its integral form. Amfortas fell because of sex. He dreadfully suffered with the pain of remorse, but, thanks to the sexual mysteries, he totally regenerated and healed himself. The great Kabir Jesus said, "If any man will come after me, let him deny himself, and take up his cross and follow me." Matthew 16 verse 24. The Knights of the Holy Grail did deny themselves. They dissolved the pluralized I by incinerating the satanic seeds, by bathing themselves within the waters of Lethe and Juno. The Knights of the Holy Grail worked in the flaming forge of Vulcan. They never ignored that the cross is the result of the insertion of the vertical beam inside the formal ties. The Knights of the Holy Grail have sacrificed themselves for the sake of humanity. They have worked with infinite love in the great work of the Father. Chapter 42. The Sacred Fire. The sexual energy polarizes itself in the two following ways: static or potential, Kundalini, and dynamic. These polarizations, known by all cultural and spiritual persons, are certainly active forces within the organism. It is obvious that within the dorsal spine, 7 very special magnetic centers exist. Infinite igneous powers are found latent within them. All of the multiplicity of divine powers enter in activity with the ascension of the sacred fire along the medullary canal. The fundamental clue in order to awaken this sacred fire, the Kundalini, is certainly hidden within sex yoga, within the Maithuna, within the sexual connection of the lingam yoni, phallus uterus, but without the ejaculation of the Ens Seminis, entity of semen. This is because the whole ens virtutis of the fire is enclosed within this semi-solid and semi-liquid substance. The refrained desire will make the sexual energy flow inward and upward towards the brain. When the solar and lunar atoms of the seminal system make contact in the coccyx near the tribene, the base of the dorsal spine, then, the sacred fire is awakened in order to rise through the medullary canal until the brain. It is urgent to comprehend, it is necessary to know, that if the entity of semen is spilled, then, the ascending fire descends 1 or more vertebrae, according with the magnitude of the fault. The Kundalini, the divine fire, ascends slowly in accordance with the merits of the heart. Those who walk upon the path of the razor's edge know very well by direct experience that the Divine Mother Kundalini, the sacred fire, conduces Shiva, the Holy Spirit, to the cerebral center and finally into the heart temple. No authentic esoterist would ever dare to deny that a static state always exists behind any activity. We can undoubtedly find the fundamental static center of the human organism in the coccygeal bone, base of the dorsal spine. This coccygeal chakra is in itself the Church of Ephesus of Christian esoterism. It is the support root of the physical body and of all movements of vital forces within the interior of our organism. We know by direct experience that in this specific center of the body, the igneous serpent of our magical powers is found coiled 3.5 times. This is the serpentine annular fire which is marvelously developed in the body of the ascetic. A very careful analysis of this magnetic coccygeal center permits us to comprehend that this in itself is consciousness. There is no doubt that this center possesses very special qualities. The Kundalini, the contained power within this sighted coccygeal center, becomes efficient and definitive for the awakening of the consciousness. It is obvious that this sacred fire can open the igneous wings of the caduceus of Mercury upon the dorsal spine of the initiate. Thus, this is how we can consciously penetrate into any department of the kingdom. The Hindustani adepts make a distinction between the supreme cosmic consciousness and its active energetic power, which is capable of penetrating within the most profound zones of our subconsciousness in order to really awaken us. The Oriental wise men say that when the cosmic consciousness is manifested as energy, then it possesses two identical faces, the potential and the kinetic. The Kundalini, the sexual fire, is without a doubt a Vedantic and Jahvistic truth, which exactly represents the whole universal process as a wise polarization in the consciousness itself. To utilize this sacred fire, the igneous serpent of our magical powers, in order to awaken the consciousness is an intimate, vital, and indispensable necessity. The human being, or better if we say, the poor intellectual animal mistakenly called man, has his consciousness completely asleep. Therefore, he certainly is incapable of vividly experiencing that which is not from time, that which is the reality. The sacred fire possesses very special and effective virtues, in order to take out the poor human biped from the unconscious state in which he is situated. Whosoever develops this sacred fire with all of its 7 degrees of power, obviously acquires certain faculties with which he can command the creatures of fire, air, water, and earth. Nevertheless, it is urgent to comprehend that the sword, forged by Vulcan, must be incandescently tempered within the spermatic waters of the Styx lake. Disgraceful is the one who spills the cup of Hermes. It had been good for that man if he had not been born, or it would be better for him that a millstone were hanged about his neck, and he were drowned in the depth of the sea. Matthew 18 verse 6, Matthew 26 verse 24. Aeneas, the eminent Trojan hero, with his flaming sword on high and looking up fixedly at the sun, uttered words while in prayer. Such words could only be comprehended by those who work in the magistery of fire. He put as his witness the cosmic Christ, his blessed land which he invoked, also the all-powerful Father who dwells in secret, and Saturnian Juno Kundalini, the eternal spouse of the third Logos. He called to glorious Mars, Lord of wars, and to all the elemental creatures of the fountains and rivers, to all the children of the fire, to all divinities of the blue sea. He even promised that if victory should chance befall to his enemy Turnus, he would withdraw to the city of Evander defeated. But, if victory would be granted to him with Mars being in his favor, then, he would not convert the Italians into slaves. He would only think in coexisting with them as friends, and that is all. The following oath of the good King Latinus becomes very significant to all of those who work in the magistery of fire. When he looked up fixedly to the sun, and called as his witness the sacred fires which stand lit within us and the divinities, he said, "The day shall not come when men of Italy shall violate this treaty or break this peace, whatever chance will bring." King Latinus put the same divinities to witness all his oaths, the earth, sea and stars, the 2 children of Latona, the unmanifested Procrity, Diana and Apollo, and Janus, Lanos, with his O, the 3 vowels which are chanted during the sexual trance of the Maithuna. This great King Latinus did not forget in his prayer the terrible abode of Pluto and the infernal gods, those divine beings, those sacred individuals who renounce the happiness of nirvana, in order to live in the infernal worlds to fight for the decidedly lost ones. All of these prayers, all of the supplications and oaths from the ancient classic world, certainly become incomprehensible without the sacred science of fire. The advent of the fire within our own selves is the most formidable cosmic event. The fire transforms us radically. The 4 letters written upon the cross of the Redeemer of the world come into my memory in these instants: in re ignis natura renovator integra. The fire renews nature incessantly. There, in the profound night of the centuries, in the ancient Egypt of the pharaohs, the great Kabir Jesus, while practicing the Maithuna with a vestal of a pyramid, chanted the mantras Inri, Enre, Onro, Unru, Onra. He resounded each letter in a prolonged and profound way. It is obvious that each one of these mantras is divided into 2 esoteric syllables for its pronunciation. We need to be swallowed by the serpent. It is urgent to convert ourselves into living flames. It is indispensable to achieve the second birth in order to enter into the kingdom. Chapter 43. Rune Lof. I was still very young, and she, the starry night, was named Urania. So, on one of those nights, it does not matter which one, I abandoned this physical body for a while. How happy I felt while out of the dense body. There is no better pleasure than feeling oneself as a detached soul. Past, present, and future become an eternal now. To penetrate within the parallel universes becomes relatively easy when one has the consciousness awakened. While in the parallel universe of the 5th dimension, I felt the necessity of invoking a master, thus. I cried with a great voice, calling, beseeching, asking. In an instant it looked as if the whole universe was transformed. Such is the power of the verb. The silver cord has the power of infinitely elongating itself. This is how the souls can freely travel throughout the starry space. So, I traveled a lot and arrived at the temple. Filled with ecstasy, I advanced through the mysterious path which conduces the initiates until the doors of this very saintly place. I was then unexpectedly attacked by a great beast. By a Maitreyic bull, which was dreadful in a great manner. Without boasting of valiance, I tell you, beloved reader, that I did not feel fear. I confronted the animal in a resolute and blunt way, holding it by its horns. Thus, I managed to sink it down to the ground. However, in those precise moments something unusual happened. Before my astonished consciousness, a chain of iron dropped, and as if by magic the terrible animal disappeared. I intuitively comprehended everything in those moments. Clearly, I needed to make myself free, to break the slavering chains, to eliminate the animal ego. Afterwards, I continued on my way and I entered through the doors of the temple. I became inebriated by an exquisite spiritual voluptuousness. Certainly, I would not change those instants, not even for all the gold of the world. What happened afterwards is well known by the gods, and now I write it for the humans. I saw the chariot of the centuries, which was driven by 3 masters of the White Lodge, and a venerable elder was in this chariot of mystery. How can I forget such a face? Such a countenance? Such an appearance? Such sublime perfection? The forehead of that elder was certainly high and majestic, his nose straight and perfect, his lips fine and delicate, his ears small and recoiled, his beard white and with an aureole of light, and his hair of an immaculate whiteness which was falling over his shoulders. It is obvious that I could not stop inquiring about him, since he was terribly divine and formidable. The name of him is Peter, answered one of the Hierophants who was driving the chariot of the centuries. Then after, O God of mine, I abased myself on the ground before this elder of the centuries, and filled with infinite love and compassion, while speaking in the golden language, he blessed me. Since then I have reflected a lot, and I will never be sorry for having taught humanity the gospel of Peter, the Maithuna, sex yoga. Peter said, Behold, I lay in Zion a chief cornerstone, elect, precious. Unto you therefore, which believe he is precious, But unto them which be disobedient, the stone which the builders disallowed, the same is made the head of the corner, and a stone of stumbling, and a rock of offense. 1 Peter 2 verses 6, 7, 8. But then, what about the Holy Grail? Is it not perhaps the same initiatic stone? The Grail is a precious stone which was brought to the earth by the angels, and entrusted to an initiatic fraternity for its custody. This fraternity was named the Grail Custodians. Here we are then with the stone of Jacob, the sacred stone of the Scottish Liaphale, the cubic stone of Jesed which the Hebraic Kabbalists locate in the sex. The legitimate text from Wolfram of Eckenbach, related to this holy stone and to the White Brotherhood which wisely have custody of it, effectually is as follows. Those heroes are animated by a stone. Do not you know its august and pure essence? Iris called lapis electric, Magnus. Any marvel, magic, can be performed through it. As the phoenix, which is precipitated into the flames. It can be reborn from its own ashes. Because within the same flames it rejuvenates its plumage, thus rejuvenated, it glows more beautiful than before. Its power is such that any man, who, no matter how unhappy in his own state he might be, no matter his color, no matter his face, instead of dying as others, he no longer knows what age might be, and whether man or woman, they shall enjoy from this ineffable delight, which is to contemplate the stone, for more than 200 years. This initiatic stone is esoterically converted into the Hermes cup, into the sacred chalice. Pedro, Peter, the initiatic revelation, is within the sex, and anything that is not through this way signifies a useless loss of time. It becomes tremendously significant that as much in the north of America as well as in the same whole continent, we can find engraved on the stones the laughter, or runelauf, whose meaning is Savior. It is obvious that we must build the church for the intimate Christ upon the living stone. Woe to those who build their interior temple upon the quicksand of all theories. Rain will fall, rivers will run, and their house will crumble into the abyss, where only weeping and the gnashing of teeth are heard. If we join two lofts by its arms, then we have the letter M of matrimony. It is clear and certain by all means that only by treading upon the path of the perfect matrimony can the wedding garment of the soul be attained. This garment is the perfect synthesis of the solar bodies. Woe to those unhappy ones who present themselves at the banquet of the Lord, without the wedding garment. The command of the king is written. Bind him hand and foot, and take him away, and cast him into outer darkness. There shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth. For many are called, but few are chosen. Matthew 22 verses 13-14. Practice. The practice which corresponds to this rune consists of going towards the sun in the morning. In the moments of sunrise, adopt a mystical attitude. That is, lift the hands as shown by the rune. In this way one implores unto He, the Son, Christ, for esoteric help. This practice must be performed on the 27th of each month. Chapter 44. The Final Liberation. In the name of the truth, we have to affirm the necessity of renunciation. We need to pass through the great death, and this is only possible by totally liberating ourselves from the mind. When nature has been radically dominated, omnipotency and the omniscience are the logical result. When the self-realized Gnostic renounces even to the ideals of omnipotency and omniscience, the destruction of the true seed of evil, the one which brings us into the Mahamvantara, cosmic day, after the great pralaya, cosmic night, is precipitated. It is obvious that whosoever has achieved the intimate self-realization has the right to live in nirvana, but, if he renounces to such happiness, he will continue upon the direct path which leads to the absolute. Nevertheless, many lateral paths exist, as well as tempting gods, who are many times more dangerous than human beings. They tempt us, not because of evil or jealousy, not even because of fear of losing their place, as many Oriental authors mistakenly suppose, but because of compassion. In these instants in which I write this chapter, something very interesting comes into my memory. A certain day, after having made a nirvanic renunciation, I was joyfully in my seventh principle, Atman, upon a precious balcony of an ineffable mansion. It is clear that I was in Nirvana, the region of the Dharmasayas, the world of gods. Suddenly, floating in that sacred space, many blessed Nirvanis approached me. Certainly, seeing these ineffable beings dressed with their tunics of Dharmasayas was worthy of admiration. When seeing them, I could verify by direct experience that these beings are living flames with 3 wicks and that they are immortal. To that end, one of those ineffable ones took the floor in order to tell me, "My brother, why are you going through that so narrow, so bitter, and so hard path? Here in Nirvana. We are happy. Stay here with us." The human beings could not patronize me with their temptations, you gods will not do. So, not even by a long shot. I go to the Absolute. That was my answer. Afterwards, I left that precious place with a firm and decided step. The Gnostics who do not achieve absolute perfection die. Then, they are converted into gods. They commit the mistake of abandoning the great direct path. They undertake the lateral paths and acquire many powers. Afterwards, it is clear that they need to reincarnate anew, in order to enter again into the direct path which will take them into the Absolute. It is indispensable to avoid our mental content that takes on diverse forms, with the goal of attaining the absolute quietude of the mind. The direct knowledge grants us very beautiful qualities, but whosoever walks on the direct path must not be attached to such virtues. The obtaining of psychic powers never leads to any liberation. It is nothing else but a search for vain enjoyments. The possession of occult powers does not do anything else but increase that which is mundane in us, which in the end makes this existence bitterer. Even when almost achieving the total liberation, numerous souls fail because they cannot absolutely renounce all their occult powers. Those beings submerge themselves for a short time within nature, in order to emerge anew as owners, chiefs, and lords. Thousands of gods exist of this type. They are divine and ineffable. But they have not the right to enter into the Absolute. Many self-realized ones exist, who are submerged within nature. Certainly, these are brethren who have desisted in this part of their perfection. While impeded for a certain time in reaching the end, they continue governing this or that part of the universe. Certainly, the holy gods correspond to certain superior functions of nature, which are attained by different souls. However, in reality, they still have not achieved the final liberation. Only by renouncing the idea of converting ourselves into gods, and of becoming rulers of kalpas, cycles, can the radical absolute liberation be achieved. Success is close for the one who is extremely energetic. We need to be pitiless towards ourselves. To renounce and to die from instant to instant is urgent. We can enter into the Absolute, but only based on many renunciations and deaths. I talk to human beings based on my own direct experience. I am an avatar from Ishvara. Really, Ishvara, the Supreme Master, is a very special Purusha who is exempted from sufferings, actions with results, and desires. Imagine the universal spirit of life as an ocean without beaches, without shores. Think for a moment in a wave which emerges in order to get lost anew within its liquid element. Then, this diamantine wave would be Ishvara. Brahma, the ocean of the spirit, manifests itself as Ishvara, who is the master of masters, the governor of the universe. Within him, that omniscience, which in others only exists as a germ, becomes infinite. He is the master, even of the ancient masters, since he is not ever limited by time. The word which manifests him is Aum. So, Ishvara came unto me, and he told me, "You must write books, messages, pamphlets, and tajitlis." "Lord," I exclaimed, "what does the word tajitlis mean?" The Lord answered, "To form the Salvation Army, the Gnostic movement, the Paskla." And then I comprehended. Ishvara is the true prototype of perfection. Certainly, he is very much beyond the body, the mind, and the affections. Nevertheless, truly I tell you, beloved Gnostics, that first you must achieve the second birth. You must die in yourselves and give even the last drop of blood for this suffering humanity. Only thus can you tread upon the path of John, which is the direct path that will take you until the absolute, beyond human beings and gods. Do not commit the error of awaiting for the law of evolution to conduce you to the final liberation. This direct path is only possible through incessant intimate revolutions. Now you are only imitatus. In order to climb the 3 triangles, you must first convert yourselves into adeptus. Angels, archangels, and principalities constitute the first triangle. Potencies, virtues, and dominions personify the second triangle. Thrones, cherubims, and seraphims personify the third triangle. That which has no name, that which is not of time, which is the absolute, is very much beyond these 3 ineffable triangles. Chapter 45. The Dream of the Consciousness. Well, beloved Gnostic disciples, with a lot of efforts and great love, we have arrived at the penultimate chapter of this 1968 to 1969 Christmas message, and it is convenient for the good of the great cause to eliminate certain weeds which obstruct the way. Something very grave exists in all of this matter. I want to emphatically refer to the dream of the consciousness. The 4 Gospels insist in the necessity of awakening, but disgracefully, people suppose that they are awakened. What is even worse is that certain type of individuals exist everywhere, who, by the way, are certainly very psychic, yet they not only sleep, but moreover, they dream that they are awakened. These kinds of people self-denominate themselves, so to speak, seers. They become very dangerous because they project their dreams, hallucinations, and madness upon others. Precisely, they are the ones who accuse others of crimes they did not commit, and this is how they destroy homes. It becomes obvious to comprehend that we are not talking against the legitimate clairvoyants. We are only referring to the hallucinating ones, to those sincerely mistaken ones who dream that they are awakened. Truly, with profound pain we have evidenced that the cause of esoteric failure is due to the sleeping consciousness. Really, many sincere, devout Gnostics who are lovers of the truth fail due to the lamentable state of their sleeping consciousness. In ancient times, the great arcanum, the Maithuna, sex yoga was only taught to those neophytes who had awakened their consciousness. The Hierophants knew very well that the sleeping disciples sooner or later would abandon the work in the 9th sphere. What is the worst is that these failing ones self-cheat themselves by thinking the best of themselves. Almost always they fall as harlots over the arms of some new little school which will grant unto them some kind of consolation. Afterwards, they pronounce phrases like these: I do not follow the Gnostic teachings, because they demand a couple. This is a matter for oneself, since the liberation, the great work, is a matter which has to be searched for alone. Naturally, the only cause of all of these words of self-consolation and self-consideration is their own self-justification. If these poor people could have their consciousness awake, then they could evidence their error. They would comprehend that they did not beget themselves alone, that they have a father and a mother, and that there was a coitus which gave them life. If these poor people could have their consciousness awake, then they could verify for themselves that as above so below, and vice versa. They would directly experiment with their crude reality. They would be perfectly aware of the lamentable state in which they are in. Thus, they would comprehend the necessity of the Maithuna in order to build their solar bodies, the wedding garment for their souls. This is how they would achieve the second birth, which the great Kabir Jesus spoke about to the Rabbi Nicodemus. But such wisdom-taunting ones are asleep, and truly, they are not capable of verifying for themselves that they are dressed with protoplasmatic bodies, with lunar rags, that they are wretched and miserable. The dreaming ones, the sleepy ones who suppose that they are awakened, not only harm themselves, but moreover, they cause grave harms to their fellow men. Truly, I believe that the sincerely mistaken one, the sleepy one who dreams of being awake, the mythomaniac who believes himself to be a super-transcended one, the hallucinated one who qualifies himself as being an illuminated one, is used to doing very much harm to himself and to humanity. He does more harm than that inflicted by the one who never in his life has entered into our studies. We are talking in a very blunt language. However, you can be sure, beloved reader, that when many sleeping and hallucinated ones read these lines, instead of stopping for a while in order to reflect, correct and rectify themselves, They will only search for the way of incorporating my words to themselves with the evident purpose of supporting their madness. For the disgrace of this poor human ant-hive, people carry within themselves an awful secretary, which is always wrongly interpreting the Gnostic teachings. We are referring to the pluralized I, the myself. What is the most comical aspect of Mephistopheles, the ego, is the way in which he disguises himself as a saint. It is clear that the ego is pleased when it is placed upon altars and is worshipped. It becomes pathetic and evident to comprehend in depth that while the consciousness continues bottled up within the pluralized I, not only will we sleep, but even worse, the consciousness will sometimes have the bad taste of dreaming of being awakened. The worst genre of madness is the result of the combination of mythomania with hallucination. The mythomaniac type of person is the one who boasts of being a god, who feels himself to be super-transcended, who wishes to be worshipped by all of the world. When studying this chapter, these types of persons will accommodate my words to others, since they will think that they have already dissolved the I in themselves, even though they might have it more robust than a gorilla. You must be very sure that when a sleeping mythomaniac works in the forge of the Cyclops, very soon they will abandon this work, and will say, I already achieved the second birth, I am a liberated one, I have renounced nirvana for the love of humanity, I am a god. We have seen many ugly things within our beloved Gnostic movement. It becomes dreadful to see the mythomaniacs, the sleepy, hallucinated ones prophesying madness, slandering their neighbors, qualifying others as black magicians, etc. Certainly, this is dreadful. Devils judging devils. All of these perfection boasters do not want to be aware that in this painful world in which we live, it is sometimes almost impossible to find a saint. Every magician is more or less black. In no way can one be white while the demon, the pluralized I, is inserted within the body. The attitude of going everywhere saying that such a fellow is a fallen one, is certainly a joke of very bad taste, since in this world all the people are fallen. The attitude of slandering neighbors and destroying families with false prophesies is proper of hallucinated ones, of people who dream of being awakened. Truly, if someone wants to self-awaken, then he has to have the resolution of dying from moment to moment. Let him practice deep meditation, let him be liberated from his mind, let him practice the runes such as we have taught them in this book. Constantly, many letters from many sleepy ones are mailed to me at this patriarchal headquarters of the Gnostic movement, which say, my wife, my friend, or such fellow, is very evolved, is a very old soul, etc. These poor sleepy ones who talk like this, think that time and evolution can awaken them, can self-realize them, can take them to the final liberation. These people do not want to comprehend that evolution and its twin sister involution are exclusively two mechanical laws of nature, which work in a harmonious and coordinated way, in the whole of creation. When one awakens the consciousness, then one comprehends the necessity of emancipating oneself from these two laws and of penetrating into the path of the revolution. We want awakened people, firm and revolutionary. In no way do we accept incoherent, vague, imprecise, insipid and inodorous phrases, etc. We must live alert and vigilant as the watchman in an epoch of war. We want people who work with the three factors of the revolution of the consciousness. We lament the cases of too many sincere, mistaken ones, sleepy ones who only work with one factor, which disgracefully is many times wrongly done. We need to comprehend what we are: poor, sleepy beasts, machines which are controlled by the ego. Chapter 46. Rune Gibor. The discs or baked clay coins, which are very abundant in the marvelous ruins of ancient Troy, are engraved with Jaina crosses or swastikas. This invites us to think that the people of Shekelmesha, even when they were related to the Atlanteans, were also carrying the Aryan genes in their veins like the famous Yucatecan populace. We must remember that the Aryan populace began about 1 million years ago. The first of 3 Atlantean catastrophes happened 800,000 years ago, and the last one, as we already said in our former Christmas message, happened about 11,000 years ago. The swastika of Phusaelas is a profoundly significant esoteric symbol. Such an ineffable sign actually glows over the head of the great serpent of Vishnu and in the Sheshtanunta of 1,000 heads, whose habitat resides in Padala or the inferior region. If we study this matter in depth, then we come to evidence that all of the ancient populaces always put the swastika at the head of their religious emblems. We also find Thor's hammer, which is the magical weapon forged by the pygmies against the giants, or cosmic titanic forces, who were in opposition to the law of universal harmony. The sacred swastika is then the hammer that produces the tempests which the Auses or heavenly lords use. Its rectangular, elbowed arms in the macrocosms clearly express without the least bit of doubt the incessant evolutions and devolutions of the seven cosmoses. The swastika in the microcosms represents the human being with his right arm aiming towards heaven and the left arm aiming towards the earth. The swastika is an alchemical, cosmogonical, and anthropological sign with 7 distinct interpretative clues. In short, it is, as a symbol of transcendental electricity, the alpha and the omega of the universal sexual force, from the spirit to the matter. Therefore, whosoever achieves the grasping of all of its mystical significance remains free from Maya, illusion. Without any doubt, the swastika is the electrical windmill of physicists. All of the mysteries of the lingam yoni are enclosed within it. The swastika in itself is the cross in movement, the rune gibo in movement, that is to say, sex yoga, Maithuna, sexual magic. Gnostics know very well that the Ens Seminis, which is contained within the endocrine sexual glands, is the water of life, the fountain of immortality, the elixir of longevity, the nectar of spirituality. The intimate self-realization is rooted exclusively in the medulla and the semen. Therefore, anything that is not through this way is lamentably a waste of time. Everybody would like to submerge themselves within the current of sound in order to achieve the final liberation. Albeit, verily, verily, I say unto you, except you be born again, you cannot enter into the kingdom of heaven. Truly, this matter about being born again in the sanctum regnum is something that belongs to the mysteries of the cross, of the swastika. The god of life of Aztec Mexico carries the swastika cross on the forehead, and the priests had it as an ornament over their sacred vestures. It is obvious that without sexual alchemy, without the electric windmill, without the sacred mysteries of the swastika, the intimate self-realization, the second birth which the great Kabir Jesus talked about to the Rabbi Nicodemus, becomes something more than impossible. In Zen Buddhism from Japan, the onion with its distinct layers symbolizes the human being with his subtle bodies. In the Occidental world, distinct schools of pseudo-esoterism and pseudo-occultism study such supersensible vehicles. Zen monks emphasize the necessity of disintegrating, of reducing to dust such subtle bodies in order to achieve the final liberation. Zen philosophy conceptualizes that these subtle organisms are nothing else but simple mental forms that must be dissolved. It is evident that these internal bodies, which were studied by Mr. Leadbeater, Annie Besant, and many other authors, are nothing else but lunar bodies, protoplasmatic bodies which evolve until certain points that are perfectly defined by nature. Then afterwards, they precipitate themselves into the involuted way until reaching the point of their original departure. Therefore, it is obvious that the lunar bodies have a beginning and an end. Thus, the Zen monks are not mistaken when they try to dissolve them. But, let us go a little bit further. Let us talk about the Tesoma Heliacon, the wedding garment of the soul, the body of the solar man. Remember the evangelical parable of the wedding feast. When the king came in to see the guests, he saw there a man which had not on a wedding garment, and he saith unto him, Friend, how camest thou in hither not having a wedding garment? Matthew 22 verses 11-12. It is clear that he was speechless, since he was not prepared to answer. Terrible was the moment in which the king commanded that he be bound by hand and foot, and he be taken away, in order to be cast into the outer darkness, where only weeping and gnashing of teeth are heard. That the distinct, interpenetrated solar bodies constitute in themselves the wedding garment of the soul is something which must not surprise us. What is fundamental, what is cardinal, is to build the solar bodies, and this is only possible by transmuting the sexual hydrogen C12. It is obvious that based on incessant sexual transmutations, we can perform the condensation of the hydrogen of sex into the splendid and marvelous form of the astral solar body. It is evident that we can crystallize the sexual hydrogen into the paradisiacal body of the solar mind with the hammer of the physicists, within the forge of the Cyclops, the sex. It is indisputable that by working until the maximum in the ninth sphere, we can and must give form to the solar body of the conscious will. Thus, only in such a way, by means of these alchemical crystallizations, can we incarnate the divine spirit within ourselves. Thus, only in such a way, by working with the mysteries of the sacred swastika, can we arrive at the second birth. The absolute ignorance of these enunciated principles conduce thousands of mystic students towards the gravest errors. To ignore these fundamental postulations of Gnosticism is very serious, because the result of such an attitude is that our intelligence becomes bottled up inside of distinct dogmas and theories, which are sometimes enchanting and fascinating, yet absurd and stupid when we truly examine them in the light of the tertium organum, the third canon of thought. Max Handel thinks that the wedding garment of the soul is the soma puchikan, which is constituted by the two superior ethers of the vital body, or Lingarn Sarira of the Hindustani. This author, Handel, believes that the soma puchikan is attained by increasing the volume of these two superior ethers. This concept is very pretty, yet it is false, because these two ethers are not all that we need. It is urgent to build the superior existential bodies of the being, that is to say, the solar vehicles, if truly, what we want is to attain the second birth. In no way can the solar bodies, the wedding garment of the soul, be built without the sexual mysteries of the rune Gibor. This rune is the letter G of Masonry. It is lamentable that the did not comprehend the profound significance of this mysterious letter. The G is the swastika cross, the Amen, the marvelous end found in all prayers. G is also Got, which signifies God. It is good to know that Gibraltar was named Gibraltar in the past, that is to say, the era, the altar of the divine life from the Gibor. People have already forgotten the runic practices, but fortunately the rune cross Yibo has not been forgotten yet. When tracing the sacred sign of the swastika with the thumb, middle and index fingers, we can defend ourselves from the tenebrous potencies. The columns of demons flee before the swastika. It is written in previous chapters, yet we will never tire of repeating it. If any man will come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross, and follow me. Matthew 16 verse 24. Peter, when crucified with his head downwards towards the hard stone and with his feet vertically upwards, invites us to descend into the forge of the Cyclops, into the ninth sphere, in order to work with the fire and the water, which is the origin of worlds, beasts, human beings, and gods. Every authentic white initiation begins here. The infrasexuals protest against the sexual alchemy, against the swastika. The infrasexuals are the degenerated, the declared enemies of the third logos. If someone tells you that it is possible to achieve the self-realization without the holy cross, that is to say, without the sexual crossing of two people, wife and husband, then tell them that they lie. If someone utters maledictions against sex and assures you that sex in itself is bestial and satanic, then tell them that they lie. If someone tells you that to spill the cup of Hermes is necessary, and that this matter has not even the minuscular of consequences, then tell them that they lie. If someone teaches you some beautiful doctrine which excludes the sex, then tell them that they lie. Woe to you sodomites, homosexuals, enemies of the opposite sex. For you, there will be only weeping and the gnashing of teeth. Woe to those who call themselves Christians and who carry the cross hanging over their chest, yet they abhor the Maithuna, the sex yoga. For these hypocritical Pharisees, there will be only weeping and desperation. Woe! 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 Samael Aun Weor.